And now, it's the Finding Your Spine podcast with host Chase Spears.
Welcome back to the Finding Your Spine podcast, where we call you to live and lead boldly in the truth. And I'm talking to someone today who knows not only how to do that, but he spends his career helping others to do the same thing right now. Mike Berry, coming to us from First Liberty Institute in Plano, Texas. Fellow veteran, Marine Corps, Semper Fi. Brother, it's great to have you here with us today.
Semper Fi. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited about it. I've been tracking your work for a while, and we've talked many times over the years from my time in the ranks, and I know you've got a lot of great stuff to add to this continual theme that I try to do here of encouraging people to stand up and be bold, and that's what your entire career is built on, whether it be military service and legal practice. So this is going to be fun. Before we jump in, I'll just give a quick bio of Mike. Mike Berry serves as the Executive Director of External Affairs and as the Senior Counsel at First Liberty Institute. He is fresh to that role after serving as the Chief Counsel to U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. Before he spent his time there on the Hill, Mike served the cause of religious freedom working in public interest litigation with the First Liberty Institute from 2013 through 2024. But his legal career started in the U.S. Marine Corps as a staff judge advocate, where he served for 7 years. Mike, like me, has spent time in Afghanistan. He deployed there in 2008, and he's also served as an adjunct professor of law at the U.S. Naval Academy. Continues to proudly serve our nation as a member of the Marine Corps, as well as fighting for religious liberty there at First Liberty Institute. Mike holds a bachelor's degree from Texas A&M University and a law degree from The Ohio State University. Quite a list of accomplishments there, buddy. What are you doing hanging out with me?
I should ask you. What are you doing hanging out with just a regular old guy like me?
Well, man, I'm just grateful for you. I'll never forget the way that we got connected when I was going through my own issue in the Army with a supervisor who did not respect religious liberty. And I'll tell you, it was a great comfort for me to be able to speak with you, to get some counsel, and to know that should my supervisors want to push this, that there is a place to go, that there are people who are willing to help, they're willing to engage, because it's so frequent. Military service members will reach out to the processes that are supposed to be there to help them, and many times they do get help, but many times they do not get help. And it's just, you guys have done so much for service members over the last few years. You're still representing a lot of service members. I know you represent some of the people I've had on the show before as well, and I'm just so grateful for it. And we're going to talk a lot about that. But before we do, I'd love to know. I've never asked you this before, and I'm ashamed to say I should have. But how did you end up working in religious liberty litigation? What took you this way?
That's a great question. So I'd say it started when I started to think about going to law school, and I was reading a number of books. And one of the books I happened to pick up was called Faith of Our Founding Fathers. And it was written by Tim LaHaye. So yes, that Tim LaHaye, the one of the co-authors of the Left Behind series. And the book was really about, as the title says, the faith of our founding fathers. And so it explained that our founders were, contrary to what we've been taught in the public school system, they were not these deists or agnostics who established a godless constitution and separation of church and state, all the things that our public schools have taught us to believe over the years, that actually these were, Bible-believing, God-fearing men who wanted to establish a moral order, and that the system of government that they gave us was what they believed to be the best way to accomplish that. And I went through what I kind of call like the stages of grief, or whatever the term is. Or initially I was just kind of confused, like, wait, what? Like, are they sure? I mean, I was always told that, our founders were deists and atheists who owned slaves, who wanted to establish, a nation with separation of church and state and all those things. And then it kind of went from confusion to anger like, wait, I've been misled, right? I can't believe I've been misled because I'm a product of the public schools all the way through, elementary school, high school, undergrad, law school. Um, and so I was, angry and frustrated. And then it turned to sort of dogged determination of like, you know what? I want to help us get back to that, right? I want to help be part of the movement to help Americans understand our constitutional heritage and legacy, but then also be part of like I felt like it was slipping away and we were losing it. So that was really the earliest stages, the seeds that were planted of my passion for religious liberty. That seed began to grow when I was in law school. I actually sued my law school as a 2L, a second year law student, for religious discrimination. I was the president of the Christian Legal Society student chapter at Ohio State. We encountered religious discrimination and was really left with no choice but to sue my own law school. And I became nicknamed the most hated man in law school. Some really early lessons that I learned through that experience. And then, of course, serving in the Marines, I joined the Marines because I love our country, believe in our Constitution, and I wanted to defend it. And I was willing to put my life on the line to defend it. So to me, it was very natural to go from that to First Liberty Institute because I still view my job as to defend the Constitution. I just wear a different uniform now.
Yeah, you really do. And I'd never heard that story of you actually suing your law school. That's so like straight on, early on, this was a deeply held conviction that you had. What? And I'm sure there probably got to be other stories out there of people who are willing to sue the law school while they're in it. This is the first one I've heard. And what was that like? I'm sure that probably did not get you invited to a whole lot of cocktail parties and receptions.
Yeah, it wasn't easy by any means. It wasn't pleasant. Um, when you're in your early 20s, I think maturity wise, you're still in that phase of life, that season of life where you want to be liked. Like kind of like what you just said, Chase, you want to be invited to the cool kids parties. And I learned very early on that, you know, doing things that matter, doing things that you believe in, are sometimes you're going to get enemies if you do that. And but I wasn't put on this planet to to make everybody happy. I mean, sometimes doing the right thing. I mean, gosh, if you believe in the Bible is replete with account after account of stories of true stories of individuals, very normal, regular individuals like me. Nothing special about me. No special gifts or superpowers. Just put in a particular place in a particular circumstance and called upon to be obedient. And knowing that obedience isn't always easy, it often comes at a very heavy price, but it's always worth it. And so I believed that. So I believed that that was what I was called to do. And was it pleasant? No. Was it easy? No. Was it enjoyable being called the most hated man in law school? People that, my first year of law school, we were all friends and we all went to the same parties and hung out together and went to the Ohio State football games. We won the national championship my first year of law school. So everyone's all, buddy buddy. And then you're the skunk at the garden party, right? You sued your law school. You're being labeled a religious bigot and a zealot, both by Christians and non-Christians alike, because it was a very early lesson I learned that some of the biggest critics of religious liberty are going to be those who call themselves Christians. And why? For no other reason that you're not doing it the way they would do it. And I learned that lesson early on, Chase, that the people who are most often the most vocal and the first ones to start casting stones are those who identify as Christians who say, you're not doing Christianity the way that I would do it, so you're doing it wrong. And I've seen that play out over and over and over again as a religious liberty attorney and through my clients.
Wow. That's Man, I feel that. I feel that of people. I've seen that myself of people who will say, "Well, I'm a Christian and I believe the same thing that you do, but I wouldn't go about it that way." It's like, well, you don't have to 100% agree with how I'm going about it, but do you still believe in these things? Do you still hold these truths? Do you still believe in the God of the Bible? At some point, you have to. I'm increasingly fascinated with the saying, no enemies to the right, and golly, we don't do a good job on that, and oftentimes I just feel it, man. I'm sorry. I
Yeah,
guess that probably,
we're called to, as Christians, we're often called to unity, right? But we make the mistake of conflating unity with unanimity. And by that I mean unity, at least to me, means that we can disagree on means and methods, but ultimately we are unified in a common purpose and common belief. So we don't have to agree on everything, but we're ultimately on the same team, I guess is how I would put it. Unanimity is when we want everyone to believe and think the same thing, and therefore we silence and squelch and censor any dissenting voice. And I think you have to be very careful not to conflate those two concepts. And we often accuse those who disagree with us politically or even religiously. We like to, make that characterization of them, but sometimes we are just as guilty of doing that as believers.
yeah, that's a great point. How long did that lawsuit go?
It went through at least my second year, and I want to say it got resolved. We ended up settling the case sometime during my third year of law school because, the legal issue, which is not super important, but the legal issue is that as a Christian organization, we wanted to have the right to decide for ourselves what our beliefs would be, who we could choose as officers and members of our organization, of our Christian organization. And the university said, well, that discriminates against people who may disagree with you. And the university has a non-discrimination policy, and therefore you're in violation of that policy. And we are kicking you out, kicking you off campus and taking away your funding as an organization. And so we sued, and the university then said, okay, we're going to amend our policy for organizations with sincerely held beliefs because, the old kind of the cliche was, well, you know, shouldn't a Catholic organization be able to have Catholic beliefs and Catholic members? Shouldn't a Jewish organization be able to ensure that its members reflect its beliefs? And shouldn't a Muslim organization be able to do the same? And surely you wouldn't want a policy that says that a Jewish organization must allow a Muslim to be the president and run the Jewish organization and vice versa, because I think they would have a problem with that if you were to impose that upon them. And the university, I think, recognized, oh, yeah, they have a point. And so then they said, okay, we're going to create this exception for you. So it ended up settling out of court sometime around my third year of law school.
What a reminder that there is no such thing as the supposed neutrality that we keep being told is out there. If we'll just play nice and everything can be peaceful. Everything really does revolve around a worldview, whether you're, to the Christian perspective or any other perspective. Albert Mohler says it really well that ideology demands totality.
Yeah. Albert Moore is a lot more eloquent than I am. And I tell my kids, every person on the planet has a truth claim. And even the person that says there is no truth is professing a truth claim, right? So, and the questions you have to ask when anyone, you know, professes their truth claim, whatever that truth is okay, who gets to decide what is true, and by what standard, right? By what authority are they claiming it's true? And so, if you're a Christian, you would say that God is the ultimate truth, and he gives us that truth through his word, and that's the standard, and that's the authority that we turn to. But those who say the Bible is not true, that's a truth claim as well. And so the natural response should be, okay, That's your truth claim. By what authority? Do you profess that truth? And often, I think what we find is for most people who reject the Bible or really reject any sort of scriptural authority, whether it's the Torah or the Quran, their ultimate truth authority is themselves. And newsflash, we make terrible gods as human beings.
We do. We do. Do you think that case played a direct link in why you practice the kind of law that you practice now after getting out of the Marine Corps?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's no question that it was instrumental in forming and shaping my desire to use the whatever skills and talents I have as an attorney. I knew at that moment, like, I'm going to use these for good, right? I'm going to use these to defend that which is true, that which is right, that which is just, because I knew that what was happening to us was unjust, and it was not right, and it was predicated upon untruths. And so it lit a fire under me, and that fire didn't go out when I was on active duty in the Marine Corps. I continued to just be passionate about the Constitution, and even though I didn't always have the opportunity to litigate issues of constitutional importance or First Amendment issues, but it never left me. And then when the opportunity to join First Liberty Institute came about, back all the way back in 2012, 2013, it was just like it was too good to pass up, right? Because number one, I had the opportunity to come home to Texas, and if you ever meet anybody from Texas, you'll know it pretty soon. And if they're not in Texas, they're probably trying to find a way back to Texas. And then the second piece was not in addition to the opportunity to come back home to Texas, it was the opportunity to begin fighting for something that I knew I was passionate about.
I'm kind of curious. You fought a lot of cases, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I guess I inadvertently will. Are there any of the cases that you fought that really have a special place in your heart? And I know you fight them all with your heart and soul, and I know every client is special, but are there any that you look back and you're like, man, I'm really glad the Lord brought that one across my desk, that it really changed my life?
Definitely. There are several. I mean, several that stand out. Probably the easiest one to identify would be the Coach Kennedy case. And, for those who are not familiar, that's the case where we represented Coach Joe Kennedy, who was fired from his job as a public high school football coach for praying after games. And the case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we won a monumental landmark victory at the Supreme Court that really changed the law. I mean, it was 50 years of bad case law that was on our books for half a century, and we got it tossed out. And so that obviously is one, will always be in sort of the Hall of Fame for me. The opportunity to represent the Navy SEALs. I'm a Marine, and there are very few, people in the military that a Marine would look at and kind of be like, oh, that guy's awesome. Navy SEALs are one of the few that probably occupy that place in a Marine's heart of like, okay, those guys are pretty cool. And what I loved about working with the Navy SEALs is just how down to earth they are. They're just regular guys, and they've got families that they're trying to raise and love, and they're just trying to live out their lives and live out their faith, right, while serving in uniform. They don't walk around pretending like they got an S on their chest or anything like that. They're just regular guys who just want to live out their faith in uniform, and they just happen to be pretty special when it comes to what they get to do in the military. And so representing them through the COVID vaccine mandate battle was a huge honor. And then the last one was one that never saw the inside of a courtroom, made a little bit of media headway, but not much. But was just meaningful to me in a personal way. Was I represented an Army chaplain who got punished because he was tasked, as many chaplains in our military are, he was tasked with giving a suicide prevention brief. And during his suicide prevention brief, he wanted to share faith-based resources. He actually had a handout that he gave to the troops, and it had two sides. On one side, it was secular, like non-faith-based, just kind of, counselors or mental health professionals or psychological care providers, etc. They were not faith-based in any way. And on the other side, there was faith-based resources. And he even said, he gave a disclaimer and said, look, I'm not telling you have to do one or the other. I'm not telling you one's better than the other. I just want to make sure you have all the resources available to you that I'm aware of. And all I want you to know is that if you need help, get help. And it doesn't matter where it is or who provides it, just get the help that you need, right? All of this in the context of preventing suicide among our troops. And he was punished for that because somebody said that it offended them that he provided faith-based resources. And I thought, man, this guy's trying to save lives. He's literally trying to save lives. And no good deed goes unpunished, right? The fact that he was trying to do that and provide options to the troops, and he got punished, and we stepped in at First Liberty, we represented him, and we were able to get that punishment reversed and taken away before we had to file a lawsuit. So that was another one that was very meaningful to me because I knew of the real world impact that issue was having just at a small level, right? Maybe it only saved one life. Maybe it only prevented one soldier from doing the unthinkable and taking their own life. But if that's true, if it was only one soldier, it was worth it, right? Absolutely worth it. That's one more dad that, husband that went home to his wife that night, or father that went home to his kids that night. And so, what we do at First Liberty, it can be as impactful as a Supreme Court case, or it can be as impactful as saving one person's life. And one is not any more or less impactful than the other.
Let's go down that rabbit trail a little bit about the chaplain's case. And you had a commander who wanted to publish that chaplain. I guess did until you guys stepped in because someone took offense. And I'm thinking back to there's another case you guys represent in Jace Yarborough. Someone in the Navy musical group that was there at that retirement ceremony was offended because he referenced Solzhenitsyn in his speech. And we expect military commanders to be these big, bold, brave leaders who will take on, these massive, fearful enemies, and that they will stand between us and them, and that they will fight aggressively. And yet, at least in the years of my career, there were so many commanders who were so afraid of what if we offend this one younger enlisted person, or we offend the sensitivities of Mikey Weinstein. And I don't get it. I look at these guys and I say, aren't you the ones who are supposed to stand up to the tanks of other nations, and you're turning on your own people because of the feelings of someone who is rather insignificant? I don't understand that. Outside of just sheer trying to hang on to the politics of the day, you come across this a lot. Can you make sense of why this happens so frequently among commanders?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up. You remind me of another incident we dealt with. I want to say it was Scott Air Force Base in Illinois. The base commander wanted to put up a nativity scene at Christmas time in front of at the front gate, and somebody complained. It may have been Mikey Weinstein for all we know. Oh, this is so offensive. How dare you put up a nativity scene? This is offensive to anyone that's non-Christian, et cetera, et cetera. And I just remember, just reading the complaint and how fast that base commander raised the white flag of surrender. And I remember thinking to myself, this decorated United States military officer would probably be willing to stare down, the latest MiG, supersonic fighter from Russia, or whatever latest weapon the Chinese roll out, or North Korea or Iran, but nothing will make an American military commander shake in their boots and surrender faster than telling them that there's a baby Jesus sitting outside the front gate, you know? And I just thought, how did we get here to where, like, we have an aircraft carrier sitting in the Gulf of Hormuz that, with the push of a button, can start World War III like tomorrow. But my goodness, if you know, try to honor a fallen service member with a cross somewhere on the base, you know, it's, you know, like I said, they're quaking in their boots and like, what do I have to do? Just tell me what to do, and I'll do anything you want as long as you don't, you know, threaten me with a lawsuit. So where did that come from? I think it's cultural. We have, for a generation now, we have indoctrinated our military with a culture of fear and sort of this zero defect mentality of, you know, if you want to derail your career, or no, if you want to make sure you don't derail your career, and if you want to promote and get to the next job, get that medal on your chest, get the next rank on your collar, you do it by making sure there are no issues on your watch, right? You, like, there can't be any problems, no complaints, and that mentality creates this, again, in the commanders, they're like, I don't want any problems on my watch. You saw this during the COVID vaccine mandate, of commanders saying, I don't like the vaccine mandate. I want to support my troops who have religious objections, but there's an expectation that I have 100% compliance with my vaccination rates in my unit. And I said, I wish our commanders were more concerned with constitutional compliance than they were with vaccination compliance. And so when it comes to complaints, in the law, we call that a heckler's veto, right? Where one person can say, that offends me, and it enables them and empowers them to essentially shut down anything and everything simply because they say they're offended. And the irony of that, Chase, is that, you know, as Christians, we see and hear things that are offensive to us because they take our Lord's name in vain. I mean, the number of times I heard GD or JC, and I assume you know what I'm talking about, right? While I was in uniform, I mean, I lost count. I'm sure you did too. But my goodness, you utter one word about, you know, name whatever the, you know, the proverbial, you know, golden, or the sacred cow of the day is, no pun intended, but it's like, you know, you can't dare question LGBT ideology. You can't dare question somebody who says that they are an atheist and doesn't believe in God, because you might offend them. And so it's always been a one-way street, it seems to me. But yes, I mean, to answer your question, it's cultural. That's how we got to the point where one complaint, one person who says they're offended, literally can shut down anything they want, unless the person complaining is a Christian.
Yeah, and then pound sand. You're reminding me of a conversation I had a couple of years ago with a colleague. He agrees with you and I. He's not a Christian, but he agrees with us on all things in terms of worldview aside from faith. Very, very conservative in his political leanings. And he was forced to be the equal opportunity guy for the unit. And you know exactly how hard left-wing the trainings were for equal opportunity representatives over the last few years. And I think this was 2021, 2022, somewhere around there, that he was having to go through this training, and he was having to be the unit equal opportunity rep. And I just kind of laughed. I said, it's ironic that they've got you, the guy who believes this stuff the least, and they've made you the point guy for the unit. And he's like, yeah, it is ironic. But he understood, you know, maybe I can do some good and at least prevent the program from being weaponized as long as it's in my hands for the command. And he told me a story about how he and another guy who believes like us were at a training one day, and they had someone who was very clearly a man on stage presenting as a woman in uniform, and the expectation was, and you will accept that this 6'4", 200-pound man who's clearly a man is a woman because he says that he is. And he told me and my colleague who'd been to this training weeks later ran into each other off post, outside of duty hours, civilian clothes, walking through downtown Leavenworth, Kansas. And they started talking about the training, and it was kind of a, hey man, can you believe what we had to sit through conversation. They were both disgusted by it. And he said, but they both caught themselves and stopped talking about it because they didn't know who might be walking by that might figure out these guys are officers on Fort Leavenworth and might be offended and report. And I thought, that is not a way to live, especially if we're expected to be the ones to uphold the Constitution. To be so afraid that someone's feelings will get hurt just for acknowledging the falsities that are around us. And fortunately there are guys like you around who would have been able to help give him some counsel had that happened. But when you relayed that story to me, I thought, how in the world are we here? I mean, we shouldn't be here.
Well, and look, in the context of the military, what is the military's mission, right? It's to fight and win our nation's wars. And I hate, newsflash, war is an ugly enterprise. It's nasty, it's violent, and it requires a certain type of person if it's going to be done successfully. And so our military historically has attracted a certain type of person. If you look at all the data, the people most likely to join our military by their own self-identification, right, in these surveys, are those who identify as highly religious. Right? Those who identify as highly religious are by multiple factors more likely to join the military than those who self-identify as non-religious. So what does that tell us? It tells us that the core of our military is comprised of people of faith. And yes, there is a diversity and a plurality of faiths that we're talking about represented, whether it's Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, etc., the various denominations within Christianity, etc. But the bottom line is it's people of faith who are the ones who are stepping forward, raising the right hand and saying, I will serve. And yet it's those very people of faith who are more often than not are the ones that are being told you are not welcome here. And so that's not sustainable long term. Our military will not be able to continue. We saw this play out during the previous administration with the absolutely just abysmal recruiting and retention numbers that hopefully it sure looks like there's some promising signs that maybe we're turning the corner on that now. But 3 or 4 years ago, our recruiting and retention was abysmal. And they kept scratching their head and thinking, well, we can't figure it out. We keep putting money at it. We keep trying, fancy, slick recruiting campaigns. And I just wanted to say, guess what? Right? When you raise an entire generation, K through 12, through college and grad school and beyond, when you raise an entire generation of people to believe that the United States is evil, that it's a racist country, that that it's imperialistic, et cetera, is it any wonder that when you ask the very people that you've indoctrinated to believe that our country is evil and racist and imperialist, that now you're saying, hey, are you willing to give up your life for that country? That they're like, thanks, but no thanks. So it's just, like I said, I really hope that we're turning the corner on that, because it's people of faith that are going to continue to form the core and really the backbone of our military. And so we need to ensure that the military remains a place where they feel welcome, where they feel that they can serve and don't have to hide their faith, that they can live out their faith openly without fear while they're in uniform, knowing that the military is a place that welcomes them, not a place that's going to reject them or be hostile to them.
Yeah, completely agreed. And I'll even add to that. I remember, at least from the Army side of things, I got sent out to recruiting command the year before I retired to do a short stint helping to run the basically doing crisis comms for the recruiting crisis. And so I was on the press desk there at Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I would have these conversations with my bosses because I had this very limited supply of talking points that I was allowed to use. And of course, none of them were wrong, but none of them talked about the issues that were the most salient to why people weren't wanting to join. And I would make the argument to my bosses, hey guys, it's not that these are all wrong, but they're missing the point. Here are the reasons, and we have data behind it. Here are the reasons people who would usually be apt to join aren't joining. Let's acknowledge these things, because if you acknowledge the 800-pound gorilla in the room, you can at least deflate him a little bit. And they would say, you're right, but we don't want to embarrass the politicians, and that could potentially be embarrassing to the politicians. And my response was, well, do you want to fix the problem or not? Of course, you can guess what the answer was. But adding to that, then Secretary of the Army Christine Wormuth acknowledged that she wanted to change the whole recruiting paradigm. It had been understood that there was a strategy called the Southern Smile. It went from Texas down through the southern states into the Carolinas, and it was known for decades that's where most people who want to join the Army at least join from. And she said, that's a bad thing. We need to get away from that because that doesn't look like America. And when you tell people who wanted to join for years because daddy served and granddaddy served and great granddaddy served, when you tell them we don't want you anymore because you don't look like America, and I thought that's so elementary. Like, if you don't understand how that turns people away, then I don't know what can help you.
Yeah, and if I recall, then Secretary Wormuth also said that she wanted to get away from what she characterized as a warrior class, right? And I was incredulous. I was just flabbergasted by that, and I thought to myself, who else is going to do the fighting? You know, like that's why we exist as a military, and uh, we're not here to build widgets. We are here to fight and win our nation's wars, and the only people who are going to do that are warriors. And so if you are in a mindset of saying, I don't want warriors, right? I want what anything else. I mean, whatever else it could possibly be, but it's not warriors. Then I felt like we were lost. I mean, we were just, and I remember thinking to myself, we are ripe for the taking. If I were a hostile actor who wanted to challenge the United States and its position of primal authority on the global stage, now would be an opportune time to do that, because they've essentially declared to us their military is not a military. It's something else. It's a jobs program. It's a college education paid for program. Whatever it is, it's a DEI, petri dish, but it's not a military. And you probably recall this is when I think it went viral, this comparison of the Russian military and the Chinese military, sort of their recruiting ads, and then the U.S. Army's recruiting ad. And they did like this side by side. And it was just the old, meme of just, or whatever, the emoji of just forehead slap, head and hands.
I remember that well. It was just terribly embarrassing. I'm glad to see what recruiting commercials are starting to look like this day. And we did not have a foreign invasion during that time, but we did pick up two wars, that Gaza and Ukraine. And I'm convinced, Mike, that if we would have had firmer leadership at the strategic level in our nation at that time, this probably wouldn't have happened. Who knows? But that's what I believe. I want to ask about COVID policy. You've represented the Navy SEALs and SEALs versus Biden, and I've talked to some people who were involved in that as well. But you also were personally impacted by COVID policies because you're still a reservist in the Marine Corps. So this was also a fight for you personally.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the old, leadership maxim of you shouldn't ask your troops to do anything that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself, right? Now, that's not the reason why I objected to the vaccine. I objected on religious grounds, based on my own sincerely held religious beliefs. but I do think that it helped that at least it helped with respect to earning some trust and confidence of my clients, that they understood that I was walking through this fire with them. So yeah, it kind of brought back some of those law school memories.
Yeah, I bet. There's been some talk in the last few months is people like me, people like the folks that you've worked with, are trying to encourage the Department of War to go back and do the right thing about COVID policies, to make amends, to offer legitimate, not just talking points, but legitimate processes to begin to rectify wrongs. And there's been some discussions about where the JAG Corps falls in on this. And I had a talk, and this is public, it's on X, with Hexeth's attorney about it, and he said, look, you have to understand the military JAG Corps is really wagging the dog and really pushing commanders. And he kind of, in some ways, I don't want to say he absolved commanders of their responsibility, because you can't really do that. But he made some excuses for commanders and said, look, at the end of the day, the way the system is set up right now is if a commander does not concur with the legal opinion given them by their JAG, then the JAG is apt to make complaints against the commander. The commanders do not want that. And I'm wondering if you see anything of that nature from your perch. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, I definitely think there's some truth to that. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier with that culture of fear that has grown in our military, of commanders who want to continue to rise in the ranks and get better positions, better billets, get stars on their collars, etc. Part of that is of not having any issues under their watch is they want the JAG, they want the lawyer to clear everything that they do and to say, yes, right, the commander did everything by the book, and that way, if anything goes wrong, the commander is absolved because, well, this underwent a thorough legal review and the lawyers took a look at this. And so a lot of the problem, then a lot of the root cause as well, does lie with the JAGs, is because I remember I testified before Congress on this, and one of the points that I raised was, when it comes to matters of the Constitution and specifically First Amendment issues such as religious liberty and free speech, our JAGs are woefully underprepared and undertrained. Naval Justice School is 10 weeks long. It's in Newport, Rhode Island. This is where every Navy, Marine, and Coast Guard JAG goes through their training to understand all the nuances of military law. It's 10 weeks long. You're there, 8 to 1700, 8 to 5 for those who don't do military time. And of that 10 weeks, at least when I went through, which was longer ago now than I care to reveal, but when I went through, within that 10 weeks, we were given approximately 30 minutes was dedicated. Okay, let's even just say an hour, right, to be generous. An hour of instruction time was dedicated to the entire First Amendment. Now, the First Amendment is a complex thing, and it has, different aspects to it. Free speech, free exercise, Establishment Clause, the Petition Clause, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, right to seek redress of grievances with the government, et cetera, right? A lot of these things. And we had 1 hour of training. So then I thought, is it any wonder that we keep getting this wrong? Because our own JAGs don't know the law, right? It's why, as an attorney at First Liberty, it's like, I hate to say it, but we're not even fighting a fair fight. We continue to run circles. Anytime we have a lawsuit with the Department of Defense on religious liberty grounds, I know it's not going to be a fair fight because the JAGs just don't have the training. They don't know the First Amendment. They don't know religious liberty case law like the back of their hand. Now, am I saying that they need to be the equivalent of a First Liberty Institute attorney? No. But for goodness sakes, it's got to be more than, a 30-minute training block or a 60-minute training block. And so that's the first part of it. The second part is that cultural issue of we've built this culture of fear in our military. I'll tell you what, I just think if I go back to history, you think about people like Jimmy Doolittle, sticking his neck out. I mean, literally putting his career on the line to say, we have to win this war. And if we're going to win this war, we have to attack Japan. And if we're going to attack Japan, we're going to have to find a way to launch bombers from aircraft carriers. And everyone said it cannot be done. It cannot be done, right? And then you had Colonel Billy Mitchell, who became one of the most famous people in America after the war. He was court-martialed. Billy Mitchell was court-martialed. People don't realize this. He was court-martialed. Why? Because he disagreed with the powers that be in the government and in the Pentagon. And he said, I think you're going about this all wrong. And so they tried to court-martial him to censor him. Another story is, oh man, I'm blanking on his name. The Hacksaw Ridge story, right? Of having a religious objection, not to serving in the military, not even to being deployed to the front lines, but to carrying a weapon and killing another human being. And he said, give me a religious accommodation. And the army said no, right? Then we're at war. We have an enemy who wants to annihilate us. We need every person into the fight. No exceptions allowed. Does this sound familiar? This sounds like the COVID vaccine mandate to me, all over again. And he fought that, and he got court-martialed, and finally the army relented and said, okay, what if we made you a medic? And he said, I can do that, right? So we found a way. We found a way to accomplish the mission while also honoring and respecting the First Amendment and religious liberty. And guess what? He went on to receive the Medal of Honor for his actions in the Pacific Theater. So we've shown that not only can we do it, but we can do it, and when we do, amazing, incredible, heroic things can happen. And so I think what a powerful story of what happens when we have a military culture that is not so risk averse, that we have this zero defect mentality, but we have a culture that says, let's find a way to get to yes. Let's find a way to encourage and allow those who are people of faith to serve, because they're the ones that are most likely to serve, as I made the point earlier. But then allow them to serve with their religious beliefs intact, because when you do, it's going to unleash an incredible force for good. And so I think that faith is a force multiplier in our military, and I will believe that until the day I die, that faith is truly the force multiplier in our nation and our military that makes us the greatest, most powerful nation and military on earth.
Man, I 100% agree. I asked this question to myself. I ask it to you, and I know there's not an easy answer, so it's not a trap. But I think it allowed a lot. How do we get it back? How do we get that culture back? Because you mentioned only, being generous, an hour of training on the First Amendment in your military legal school. And I go back to the fact that of all the annual trainings we're required to get every year, weapons training, physical fitness tests, EO training, and the list goes on and on. Not a single requirement for constitutional training. To the document that we swear an oath to, the document that we swear that we'll literally die to defend. And we don't require service members to actually know it. Like, don't know how to shoot, we can teach you that. Don't know how to run, we can teach you that. Don't know how to do the job of your military specialty, there's a school for that. Don't know anything about the Constitution, out of luck, pal, figure it out on your own. I think that's a major problem, and I argue that that's not a just do that alone and that solves the problem, but I argue that's a good first step. Do you have any theories or ideas? How do we get this culture back?
Yes, I do. And I'm only going to speak for myself, because I don't know if what I'm about to say is popular or unpopular. I don't know. And quite frankly, I don't really care if it's popular or not, right? It's just what I believe. And that is, I do think it has to be both a top-down and a bottom-up approach. And the top-down approach is sort of touching on what you just said is, first of all, goodness gracious, we've got too many training requirements we have to go through every year. Cybersecurity, sexual harassment awareness, and some of these are important, right? But man, I can get a waiver to not have to do my annual physical fitness test, and in the Marines we have the combat fitness test. I can get waivers for those pretty easily, and I can get a waiver from the rifle range and the pistol range. So things that you would think would be pretty basic and fundamental to being a Marine, right? You got to be able to be in shape, because if you're in a combat situation, you got to be able to move fast and get from point A to point B and lift heavy objects and all that kind of stuff and crawl through the mud, and carry your buddy to safety if they're under fire, et cetera, et cetera. Those are basic things that we have to be able to do. We have to be able to shoot. And when we shoot, we have to be able to hit the target. But like I said, I can get waivers from those. You know what I can't get a waiver from? Tobacco cessation training. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, and every year I have to certify that I've taken tobacco cessation. Cybersecurity awareness. I have to provide a certificate that shows that I know how to not click on a spam or phishing email that I get. But I can't get out of those, but I can get out of physical fitness and knowing how to properly operate a rifle and a pistol. So, and little things like I see, and I've never met him, so I don't have any personal relationship here, but when I see Secretary Hegseth, he's taking a lot of flack and criticism for getting out and conducting PT, physical training with the troops. I'm like, that's exactly what he should be doing, is being out there and saying, this is what is expected of you, right? That I don't care if you're a private or if you're a general, there are basic things that you should be able to do if you want to serve in our military. And one of them is you should be able to run 1.5 miles without keeling over and dying. And so I applaud him for doing that. And I know that he takes a lot of flack for that. People make fun of him and say that's completely irrelevant to the job of the Secretary of War or Secretary of Defense. And I say, no, I disagree. I think that's exactly what a Secretary of Defense and Secretary of War should be doing, is being out there with the troops, showing them this, like, I'm not requiring anything of you that I don't require of myself. I hold myself to the same standard that I hold all of you to. And so that's what I mean. That's the top-down approach, and the bottom-up approach would be, stop requiring every Marine, sailor, soldier, airman, guardsman, etc., to have to do. I mean, some of these requirements are important, yes, right? But it's like, show some consistency and show some understanding of what matters in terms of prioritization. I think in the terms of the actual threats that America faces, it's far more important for me to understand how to properly use and maintain my weapon systems and my body, and an understanding of the operational terrain, et cetera, than to understand how to stop using tobacco. And I'm picking on that, but I mean, I think you get my point, is that we need to make it's the old story about putting the big rocks in first, and then the medium-sized rocks, and then the little rocks. And it feels like and every service member I talk to, this says, it just feels like for years our priorities have been backwards.
Yeah, no, they have been. And I share the same angst on training that my last few years in the Army, I was in a unit that they didn't do rifle qualifications annually, which was totally foreign to me. I remember one day I was offered the opportunity to go out to the range and do an M9 pistol familiarization fire. It wasn't even a full qualification, but it was a familiarization. And I thought, this is a no-brainer. If there's an opportunity to go to the range and get any time on a weapon, I'm a soldier, I'm a shooter first, I should go do it. And my boss was gone at the time, and so I told his civilian deputy, hey, I'm going to go out to this familiarization fire. I'll be out for a couple hours. I'll be out on the range here, so I'm going to be with the company doing this. And he's like, yeah, sure, not a problem. And a few days later, my boss came back, and he was miffed that I had that time out of the office doing that pistol fire. He looked at that as a waste of time. Your time is more valuable in the office. And I thought, the spreadsheets will still be there when I come back tomorrow. This is, every soldier should be wanting to touch a weapon at some point in time. So yeah, I feel you on all that, and I agree. I love, it does my heart good seeing Pete Hegseth out there PTing with the troops. That's something that should be a norm. And I'm kind of curious as we start to bring the plane towards landing here, what would you say to other Christian law students who are thinking about their future ahead after law school, after passing the bar, where they should serve? I know from attorneys that I talk to, I should say, tell me that the legal field is, there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of ways to make a lot of good money right now. And I know taking on religious advocacy cases is not the way to immediately put a Lamborghini in the garage. What would you say to Christian law students who feel that calling, but they feel conflicted potentially?
There's a concept in Japanese culture called ikigai. I think it's, the English spelling would be Ikigai, ikigai. And loosely translated, ikigai means the reason I wake up in the morning. And I think it's a beautiful concept because in Japanese culture, those who possess ikigai, they tend to live very long, productive, meaningful, healthy lives. And so I think that's one of the keys to long-term success, professionally as well as personally, spiritually, and physically, is that notion of ikigai. So my advice to young people, whether you're in law school, considering law school, or just doesn't even have to be in the legal profession, any profession, is figure out what your ikigai is, right? In Marine Corps speak, we would say the two most important days in your life are the day you're born and the day you find out why, right? Mark Twain said those words, and it's one of my favorite sayings because I think it's very true. And so if you feel called to go work at a big law firm where you happen to make a lot of money, I say then go do that, right? If that's your calling, we need believers in those big law firms, cutting deals in corporate boardrooms, filing lawsuits on behalf of companies. I want there to be a positive, uplifting influence in that aspect of the law. Just like if you feel called to be a law professor, then I encourage you, pursue that with all your heart because we need good, positive, edifying influences in academia. And if you feel called to do what I've done, which is to pursue constitutional law, civil rights, religious liberty, etc., then by all means pursue that as well. And it doesn't matter what you do, there's going to be a trade-off, right? Doing what I do, the trade-off is, like you said, I don't have a Lamborghini in my garage, I drive a little good, car that gets great gas mileage and gets me to the office and back every day. And I have to be okay with that, right? And the guy who works at the big law firm and wears the $10,000 suit and drives the fancy car, the trade-off for them, I talk to those lawyers all the time. I work with those lawyers. And a lot of times they'll tell me the work isn't always the most meaningful.
And where can people follow you, learn more about you, First Liberty Institute, and support the work?
Yeah, the easiest place to find us is firstliberty.org. You can learn about our cases, the work that we do. If you're interested in partnering with us and supporting us, you can find out more about that there as well. Lots of opportunities to sign up to our newsletter to stay informed. I think it's very educational. You can learn a lot about your First Amendment rights just by reading about our cases. And then also, if you do feel like perhaps you're interested in pursuing a career in this field, there's career opportunities there as well. So firstliberty.org is the place to go.
That's awesome. Well, I'm so grateful you're there. Last question. Who's a brave person you admire?
Oof, that's a good question. A brave person that I admire. Oh man, now you've stumped me. You know what? It's I'm gonna take the easy way out here, but it's absolutely true. My former boss, Senator Ted Cruz, is just knowing what I know about him and what he goes through as a United States Senator, and he does it with a smile and doesn't complain. I admire his courage and boldness.
Mike, it's just been a pleasure. I thank you so much. I know your time is very valuable and you have a lot of demands on your schedule, and so I don't take it for granted that you carved out some time for us today. You always edify me, brother, and encourage me. So thank you so much for doing this with me today. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and have me on.
Coming to you from the Herzog Foundation Studios in Smithville, Missouri. To learn more about the amazing work the Herzog Foundation does to catalyze Christian education nationwide, check them out at herzogfoundation.com. If you'd like to learn more about me and my other work, you can go to chasespears.com. I try on this podcast to bring you stories and principles of courage, but it's up to you to put them into practice. It's up to you now to find your spine. So get to it. I'm Chase Spears. Thanks for listening.
Remember to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode, and we'll see you next time on Finding Your Spine.